Good morning, everyone, and or good day. Nice to have the idea that I'm saying hello and greetings around the world. And there was a time when that couldn't be done. So I want to begin by saying that when we give mindfulness instructions or try to practice mindfulness, that often people will try too much. It's like you try now to make your mind be present or focus on the breath or do something like that, and the mind wanders off and we bring the mind back and bring my mind back. And that can be done in a beautiful way, harmonious way, but often there can be a strain or a push or an effort to be mindful. And there are other exercises that might evoke a more harmonious form of mindfulness, a mindfulness that follows along and is there kind of as a support, just comes along. And it isn't that we're emphasizing mindfulness, but mindfulness is there, it has to be there, in other ways of being. And the one I want to emphasize today is attunement. And there's a practice of becoming attuned to our life, to our experience. But for this morning in meditation, I'd like to emphasize attunement to oneself. We sit down to be present for ourselves, with ourselves, by ourselves. To become attuned here to what's going on for us. And there are some definitions of attunement. And the ones that so there are some definitions of attunement, and ones that I like are to be ready and aware and receptive. To be aware and receptive. To be just to be receptive requires awareness. And to be in harmony with what you're receptive to or what you're aware of. And this idea of harmony is what I want to emphasize today, because harmony means we're no longer in conflict with anything. We're in harmony with it. Even if we have to say no to something, there's a harmonious way of doing that we're not setting up the tension of tense opposition or contracted kind of disagreement with something or criticism of something. And we're receptive, so especially when we're sitting here meditating with ourselves, is their way of being receptive to all of who we are and to not be in conflict with anything. And to find, what does it mean to have the question, what does it mean to be in harmony with this? It does not mean giving in to anything. There's a wisdom factor that comes into play that, I'm in harmony with this by not interfering with it, without getting involved in it, without pushing it away, letting it kind of take its course. To be in harmony with the natural world, to be in harmony with our natural world within ourselves. And if we do that, then mindfulness will follow. There has to be awareness if we're asking how to be receptive and in harmony. And this absence of conflict, absence of strain, is one of the things that brings joy to meditation practice. And the joy of attunement, the joy of finding harmony with what's here now. And so we'll meditate to find a harmonious posture for yourself. A posture that's harmonious with finding a greater harmony with ourselves, a greater alignment, a greater attunement, a greater non-interference to the aliveness that can be here within. Sometimes if we take too relaxed a posture, it might feel comfortable, but it might not allow for the free, harmonious flow of vitality. And aliveness. And to gently relax your eyes, whether they're closed or open. Maybe letting your eyes rest in their sockets. Resting the eyes so there's no effort to look at anything. If the eyes are open, a focus is not that's soft and wide and not trying to see anything. And to take a few long, slow, deep breaths with the inhale, just getting to know, discovering what reveals itself in the body. Feeling the body more fully on the inhale, and on the longer exhale, settling into this body, relaxing. Letting your breathing return to normal. And a lot of the information we need to find an attunement to ourselves is found in our body. To be receptive and aware of how the body is, maybe not needing it to be any other way. But in the attunement to how the body is, a gentle but greater sensitivity, receptivity to whatever sensations exist in the body. Not prioritizing any one set of sensations, but attuning ourselves to the global experience of being in a body. And to be attuned is to be aware without strain, tightness, contraction. Even if there is strain or contraction, there's an art of attunement to that, as you would be attuned to a friend who's maybe in a difficult state, being present and open, and maybe you're a calm presence in harmony with your friend, attuned. And within this body, as part of the body, and there's the experience of breathing. Not focusing on the breath, but rather to be receptive, attuned to how the breathing is breathing itself, or how it's breathing with strain or effort. Finding a way of relating, of knowing the breathing that feels in harmony with it, or feels attuned to how it is. An attunement that allows for a care. trying to change anything in meditation, but instead to be attuned to ourselves in the present moment as we are. A kind of deep listening, deep sensitivity that is not in conflict with anything, but instead available to know it, to sense it as it is. and be attuned to oneself as one meditates. So one is not in conflict with anything, but rather aware, receptive, attentive, harmoniously, appreciating whatever degree of non-conflict you have, sitting here in the middle of your lived life. And notice if there's any joy or well-being found within whatever attunement you might have with yourself sitting here, meditating here. And as we come to the end of this meditation, the more we are attuned to ourselves, the more we're not divided from ourselves with inner conflict, the greater can be our attention, our awareness of others, our receptivity and sensitivity. So we could also find a way of being attuned to how they are, tuned in, understanding, sensitive to the state of others without conflict and without assertion, without an overlay of interpretations and meaning. Many people value being listened to. And attunement is just a expansion of listening to our whole being, listening or present. May we find ways to be deeply attuned to others so they feel respected and cared for and recognized. So they don't feel judged or criticized or belittled or used for our own purposes. May our meditation practice be a support for promoting the welfare and happiness of this world. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. And may all beings be free. Thank you. So hello and welcome to this second talk on the joy of compassion. And I think this is a very important concept that there can be joy in compassion. And to keep this as a reference point for our compassion is a protection from the compassion becoming tense or strainful or oppressive or exhausting. It can be difficult to be present for suffering in oneself and suffering for others. And part of the medicine for suffering is compassionate presence, care. And for that to be healthy for everyone involved, it has to avoid tension and strain and assertion and collapse and the kind of way of being that is not sustainable because there's exhaustion and so there's just the very idea that there's joy or well-being in the experience of compassion puts a question mark next to any other way that we are, any strainful or difficult way that we are when we have compassion. And I'd like to believe that the notion of joy, of compassion, encourages us to slow down with our compassion, to not be in a hurry to act, but rather to take the time to find a healthy way of relating to the suffering of others, suffering of the world. And one of those ways is to be attuned, to find a way to certainly be aware of it, but not just to be aware of it, to have a certain kind of openness or receptivity to receive it. Just as like we would be receptive to receptive listener to hear a friend of ours talk about their challenges. The friend doesn't feel that we're reluctantly listening, or half-heartedly listening, or somehow listening in a judgmental way, but we're just listening, receptive and aware. So in the same way, we attune ourselves to the suffering of the world before we act, before we rush to do something. And because that attunement is an absence of strain, an absence of assertion, an absence of conflict with ourselves or the others, there can be joy, there can be a well-being, there can be a sense of nourishment, there can be a lightness, there can be a sense of rightness. Even if it's very painful sometimes to be with suffering in the world, attunement, maybe you don't feel necessarily joy, but there's something that feels right to be present. There's an openness, a relaxedness. Okay, this is how it is. And this is also where it's very important to be attuned to oneself. Sometimes with compassion, the idea is that it's all about the other person, or the other people, or the suffering out there, and we're not supposed to count. And we lose touch with ourselves in the rush to act, or in the rush to be somehow focused on the suffering out there. But it's important to be present and attuned to oneself. And this is where the kind of guideline of dividing our attention 50-50 between out there and in ourselves allows for actually a greater attentiveness to others than if we just give our attention to others. And the reason for that is we're attuned to ourselves, aware here, we tend to overcome the conflicts, the distractedness, the tightness, the ways that we are that lets our attention out there be incomplete, be partial. But if we keep enough attention here for ourselves, we can relax and open up and actually have much greater attention to others than a partial attention which straining, that seems like we're only paying attention to the other person. And so rather than it being a loss, 50-50, like less compassion, less care for others, there's actually more when we are attuned to ourselves as well. And when we learn the art of not being in conflict with anything that's going on inside of ourselves, even those things which are unfortunate or not so wonderful about ourselves, because we've learned to be attuned without giving into it, attuned without being pushed around by it or acting on it. So we can make space for how we are. And as we make space for ourselves, we develop the capacity to make space for others. And to begin there, before we rush to judgment, before we rush to fix and to change. And so this lack of conflict, this attunement, this harmony, is a delight. And it just feels so good. It's kind of refreshing to be in the world attuned. Partly because attunement to self and others means that the very act of attunement is not a strain. The act of attunement is a kind of opening, a kind of relaxing outward and being present and receptive and here. And it just feels delightful to be alive in this way and to have this capacity to connect to others this way. And so there can be a joy in the attunement. And so if we're going to really allow our compassion to flow out of attunement, then the compassion will share in that joy, share in that lightness or that sense of well-being or sense of freedom or sense of rightness. I want to give many, many words, not just call it joy, because suffering is so difficult sometimes that it's, to say that there's joy and compassionate presence for it is maybe too much or not quite right. But there is something that does feel right, a rightness, a goodness, a sweetness, a gentleness. So I'm not, there's many, I don't know, different circumstances, maybe different positive states are present in the compassionate attunement to others. And these positive states can be a nourishment for ourselves. It can have a positive influence on ourselves. And maybe, if we're lucky, a nourishment or positive influence on the world around us. I've rushed to take care of problems, and in the rush to take care of people or something, I don't really show up with the best of how I am. And maybe, for example, I might feel strain or tension. And so that tension comes along and people can feel it. But if I arrive attuned and without that tension, then my presence, I hope, is helpful to other people to relax with their challenges. And then, as we become more and more attuned, and then at some point we're ready for action and to do something. But as we did in this series so far, the emphasis is whenever there's a chance, create the foundation for compassion. Don't have a rush to compassion, and then as you're compassionate, as you even act with compassion, stay attuned to yourself to recognize: is there joy? Is there well-being? Is there a sense of freedom? Because it's so easy to lose it as we get involved in the action and relatedness, relating to other people. So the joy of compassion, it's many forms of joy that can come along. Yesterday I talked about the joy that comes with being aware and having an awareness practice. Today it's the joy that comes, Today it's the joy that comes from being attuned and having a practice of attunement. So the joy of not doing something 100% successfully all the time, but the joy of engaging in the process of doing it well. So that there's room for our, for our tentative efforts, or maybe incomplete efforts, or, ways in which we're still practicing and finding our way. So may you find the joy of attunement, the joy of listening, the joy of staying present and being sensitive to the suffering of others and your own. And you might today look around as you go through your day. Can you find occasions where there might be some sense of the joy of attunement in being present and being attuned to others? The joy of being in harmony, of not being in conflict, even when there's disagreements. So, thank you very much. And tomorrow we'll talk about the joy of appreciation, that appreciating others, which maybe seems like an easier understanding of how there can be joy. But for now, attunement. Thank you.